in the Congo, the weirdest thing I ate was tripe, just intestines of I don't even know what the intestines were. I don't even know what animal they were from, but they served it with tripe and beans. They fed us warthog, which was really delicious. I've seen python. They sell python. They sell crocodile. They sell. The weirdest thing I ever saw. We're walking down past these railroads. There's a man holding parrots upside down. It's like, do they sell them as pets? No, they sell them to eat them. This guy was just selling these parrots. We thought about buying some, but no one wanted to clean it. So no, we won't eat that. So yeah, that was the weirdest stuff. Bats, they eat bats too. That's the weirdest stuff I saw in the Congo. So in Congo, they basically eat the same thing every day, and it's called saka saka. That's manioc or cassava leaves, manioc in French. And so they take the leaves and they mash them up. They have like these big wooden bowls, like mortar and pistol things, where they just mash up the leaves. They mash them, they shred them, and they take them and they add like onions and garlic, some fish, maybe some eggplant, and they boil it for hours. Just boil it for hours and hours and hours. And then they take this pot of boiling oil and pour it into this leaf muck that they made. And it makes this chow chow noise. We're asking the recipe from somebody, and they're like, chow chow. If it makes chow chow, you know you did it right. And they eat that. It's called saka saka. They can eat it with beans, which makes it saka saka medesu. And they eat it with rice. They'll eat it with the manioc root. Is very, very common. Manioc is the staple there. They'll eat the leaves. They'll take the roots, and they do anything with the roots. They can mash them up and boil them, mix them up. They make fufu with it, and which is like this dough. Not really a dough. It's I don't even know how to explain it. It's just like it's like a starch that's that you can like mold into like a sort of like a tortilla scoop, and let's use that to eat your food with your hands, which is always really fun. But Congo makes really good manioc fufu, delicious. The other food that they eat there a lot is called mwamba. It's the noix de palme, or palm nuts, and they mash those up, and it makes this really oily orange sauce that they'll eat with rice and leaves. And in Congo, it's right on the coast. So they have a lot of fish, and usually they have dried fish or smoked fish. It's pretty common that they'll cook with, as well as salted fish. So you'll be walking down the street and just see fish skinned, lying open in the sun with just salt all over them. Hundreds of flies all over them. That's just, you can't avoid it. You just get accustomed to the flies after a while because they are everywhere in the Congo. But I enjoyed the salted fish. They'd make it into this oily sort of a sauce with onions and bell peppers and tomatoes. Very salty, but really, really delicious. And that was basically everything that they eat in the Congo, were those two meals: saka saka, saka saka medesu, and mwamba. I mean, there's other stuff, but like almost on a daily basis they eat saka saka. That was the Congo. Now, food in Cameroon is probably some of my favorite food in the world. It is delicious, and they have tons and tons, like hundreds of plates. In Yaoundé, something to eat a lot is called le coq, and it's like a peanut paste. I'm not really sure how to describe it. It's not like a soup, but it's not quite like peanut butter. It's like somewhere in between, and it has leaves inside of it, and you eat it with steamed manioc root, which is really delicious. Another very common food there is called indole, And I'm not really sure how someone figured out that you could eat indole, because the actual leaf is extremely bitter. And in order to eat it, you have to wash it for about 4 hours, just by hand. Just scrub it on like a washing board. I just imagine like the first person trying it, just like, ooh, that was really bitter. Let's try and wash it and then eat it. I don't understand how that happened. But they wash it, they shred it up, they put peanut paste inside of it, and it forms like this green and white mush, I guess. But they serve it with either chicken, which is really delicious, or beef. And indole is one of my favorite meals. Very delicious. Just has like a hint of bitter, but still really good. Other meals that are really good are banana malaxe. What they do is they take just unripe green bananas, super unripe, and they take them, they peel them, they soak them in salt water for a little while, and then they cook the bananas in this peanut sauce. They serve it, but it is extremely spicy. It's one of the spiciest meals that they have. So you're eating it and you're just sweating because you're like, it's super hot outside and you're eating this extremely spicy meal. Your nose is running. You're just like starting to tear up, but it's so good you can't stop eating it. Cameroonians eat pimol, which is basically a habanero pepper. I'm not sure if it's habanero exactly, but it looks just like it and it's very spicy. And they eat that with everything. They like mash it up. They like throw a habanero pepper in the soup, just like boil it with it. They make this this paste, or this they call it pimol, but it's like a hot sauce, and they put it on everything. We actually got a member to make some for us, so we just had a container of it at our apartment. Put on eggs, you put it on spaghetti, you put it on sandwiches, anything really, pizza. But it's just extremely spicy, so you have to get accustomed to that. The weirdest thing I ate in Cameroon was beef hide. Just the skin of a cow. They have it in this meal called arrow, which if any Cameroonian is watching this, I'm sorry. I never liked arrow, but it's a very, very popular dish there. They serve it with what they call water fufu, which is like the fufu I was talking about, but it was more of a rice base, I think. And it became really wet and sort of like fell apart. And so it was just like a gloop, like almost like snot texture. And so it was really hard to eat that meal with beef hide. I did it because you don't not eat the meal, because that would be very rude. But it took a lot of chewing and swallowing to get that meal down. They have this thing. A lot of missionaries don't like this. I'm not even sure exactly what it is. It's called safu, and in Cameroon they call them prunes. They're like these purple. I'm not even sure what they are. They're like a fruit, I guess. They have this big seed in the middle, and this light green coating around it. And they boil it. And the first time you eat it, it might taste a little bit like bile, just sour and sort of ugh. But after you eat it, your first instinct is to spit it out. But after you like continue to eat it, you get addicted to it a little bit, I guess, because I would just crave prunes walking on the road, and the big African mamas would have like grills, and they'd be like grilling some prunes and some fresh corn, and a lot of missionaries will disagree with me, but that was one of my favorite things in Cameroon, were those prunes. And you can't find them here. It's understandable, but I miss them. I miss them a lot. Okay. This is deliciousness in and of itself. In the Yaoundé Bastos Church, one of the sectors there, there's a man who stands right outside. His name is Gomez. And he has this cart, and he makes what they're called spaghetti omelets. And those are the most delicious thing I've ever eaten in my entire life. He takes like spaghetti noodles and eggs, puts in tomatoes and bell pepper and some green onions. And then his secret ingredient is a little bit of sugar with cinnamon, just a tad. He mixes it all together with some piment, and he has like a grill right there in his car, and he makes an omelet with that, with all the spaghetti and eggs together. And then he takes a piece of bread, cuts it in half, puts mayonnaise on it, slides this still steaming omelet inside of it. He hands it to you like this. Every time I went to that church, basically, every Saturday I was at that church for like a baptism or something, had to get a spaghetti egg sandwich because those were the most delicious thing. I've tried to make them at home. It's just not the same. That man has a gift. His name's Gomez, so have to try that. Oh my goodness. He knows the missionaries too because he's right outside the church. He knows. We'll buy from him. So that's Cameroonian food right there. Absolutely delicious.
The food is very good in Africa. I love it. People ask me my favorite food is, I will say African food because it's just so good. It's very simple. It's fills you up pretty well because they don't have a lot, so they need a kind of food that will keep you full for a while so you don't have to eat again. Between the two nations, there are some basics that are similar, like rice. Everyone eats rice in both places. That's very African. No matter where you go, you'll eat rice. Plantains are very popular. They're really good when they chop them up into little slices and then fry them in oil. That's really good. I would say there's a lot more food in Cameroon itself than Congo, because I can count how many eating appointments I had in Congo on one hand. I think it was like 3 or 4. And we had some weddings where I sampled some food, but definitely more familiar with Cameroonian food just because I ate it more. Because they just have less in Congo. It's a lot poorer nation because their farms got destroyed during the Congo Wars in the 90s, and they haven't replanted them since. But in Cameroon, one thing that they eat a lot of is this one dish called indole. Basically, like most things in Africa, they take a plant and they cut it up, and this one's especially bitter, so they have to wash it several times to get the bitterness out. And then they cook it in oil, and then you eat it, usually with rice or plantains. That's pretty much everything. They have things called lecoq. They have other things called sanga. It's just very different plants or grasses cut up and cooked in oil. Some have corn in them. Some have sugar in them. Some have peanut butter in them. Some just sort of taste like wet grass, especially in Congo. They have the one thing called trois pièces, which is French for 3 pieces. They put fish, peanut butter, and one other thing. Some plant. I don't know what's it called. It's a certain leaf they cut up. They throw it in there. But my favorite thing I ate in Cameroon was definitely this dish they have called fufun gumbo. We actually have gumbo in America. If you ever had what's it called? Like Cajun cuisine. They have it there like in Louisiana. It's not nearly the same. Basically chopped up okra. If you've ever had okra, it's very slimy and sticky. So they use a lot of that. So when you eat the soup, if you eat it with a spoon, you just grab a spoonful and you pick it up. And the soup's here, your spoon's here, and it's connected still. And it sounds gross, but it's actually really good. I like it. A lot of other elders didn't, but that was probably my favorite. Fufu, on the other hand, it's prevalent in basically all of Africa. And they eat it in Congo and Cameroon. It's a little different in both places. My favorite kind is where they take this certain root. In English it's called cassava, in French it's called manioc. They dry it out. It's basically like a potato. A big potato, like this big. They dry it out, break it into little pieces, and they crush it into a powder. Heat up some water, they dump the powder in. You get, basically, if you've ever been to like a MLB baseball game, you get like the mini bat. You get like a mini bat, essentially. And they stir that with the mini bat. Stir the powder in the hot water until it turns into a giant sticky ball. And it's very hot, it's very sticky, and it sort of tastes like sour potatoes, but in a good way. And that sounds kind of gross, but it's actually really good. You take it, you pull off a little bit, you form it into a ball, you use that ball, you stick in whatever thing you're eating, be it gumbo or some kind of soup or stew or whatever, and then you use that as a spoon and you eat that. It's very popular over there. It's my favorite, far and beyond my favorite. Let's see what else. Beans are very popular because they're very easy to make. But one of my favorite things is in Congo. They have a thing that's called kwanga. It's amazing. It truly is amazing. It's the same root that they use for fufu and the manioc root. What they do instead is they take it and they grind it up, and they mix it with water, and they form it into like a log. And certain logs cost more depending on the size. You can get some that are this big and like that round, some that are this big and this round. Those are for like parties or weddings. They take it and they wrap it in leaves, and then they boil it, and they pull it out, and it's done. You eat it. Had the same thing in Cameroon, except they cook it, and then they bury it in the ground for a few days and let it ferment. So it gets kind of gross. I don't like that one. But in Congo, it's really good. And I eat that very, very often. Trois pièces and kwanga, because they don't have a lot, but they eat those, and it's very, very good. Very inexpensive, too. You can get a log. It's like this big, that big around, for the equivalent of 20 US cents, and that'll tide you over for a little while. They drink soda, kind of a lot, because it's sort of, you either drink beer or you drink soda, because the water can be kind of questionable. You're not supposed to drink water from like members' houses, like or the faucet or wells. I did anyway because it's just so hot that you just drink water. But oftentimes people offer you like a Coke or a Fanta or Sprite. Those are very popular. They have some regional ones. I think my favorite one's this one's called Gino, and it's basically like a fruit cocktail soda, but it's produced in Cameroon only. So if you go to Congo, you won't be able to see it. If you go to Congo, you'll be able to get passion fruit Fanta soda, which you don't find in the United States. So drink that up while you can, because it's very good.
Starting with Kenyan food, the like staple, or what most people eat day to day, I guess we'll start with breakfast, is just like toast or something simple, maybe some chapati, and then, which is like tortillas, and then the like national drink of Kenya is chai or tea. So that, you know, poses a difficulty for as a missionary, but they usually like to drink some hot beverage in the morning, so you have to like switch them over to something that's not against the word of wisdom. But that's a typical Kenyan breakfast. As missionaries, I mean, you eat what you want. I usually eat eggs and toast just because it's cheap, but you can eat whatever you want. For a typical Kenyan lunch is something called ugali and sukuma wiki. And ugali, as you'll get to know, they call it different things throughout Kenya, but it's just corn flour that's boiled. And so it kind of has the consistency of Play-Doh. It doesn't really have any taste. It's just really like a caloric filler, so it like gets you through the day. It's not like tasty though. Some people don't like it, and I don't know how you can't not like it, because it doesn't really taste like anything. It just doesn't taste good. So it's just like you're eating something to fill your stomach. And then sukuma wiki is just a green. I think they call it collard greens in English, and it's just something to give the ugali flavor. So that's like a pretty typical meal. You'll eat a lot of cow or beef, but it's not like your typical nice cuts of beef. It's usually what a lot of missionaries will call bubblegum beef, because you can chew it for days and it doesn't seem to get any less big or chewy. So you just kind of have to get used to eating like low quality cuts of meat. Other things that you'll eat are more fancy meals. They have a lot of different traditional foods. Mukimo is like mashed potatoes with beans and pumpkin leaves and corn mixed in together. That's probably one of my more favorite meals. It's a Kikuyu dish. They also have chapati. There's a lot of Arabic influence in Kenya because of the slave trade in East Africa was run out of Zanzibar, which is in Tanzania, but a lot of the slaves were traded from this area, and so there's a lot of Arab influences, and still today, especially along the coast, a lot of Arab influences. So your typical Arabian foods are there. You have different curries and other things, but as a missionary, unless you're teaching people from that descent, you're probably not going to eat those things, but they do have a lot of the spices and more of the like flatbreads and stuff that you can get as well. There's other greens, so like ugali is like the staple, and then you just eat everything with it. So whether it be a stew or various other things that they'll make. You'll eat it. To be honest, I don't think Kenyan food is very hard to like. It's just not very flavorful. It has like no spice and it's quite bland. So it's not like you're gonna love it, but I don't think you're gonna hate it per se. And then over time, your taste buds, I guess, get more sensitive and you actually find the taste that's in the food. But it's quite bland, but not something that you're gonna, in my opinion, I didn't have a hard time enjoying a meal. It just was kind of bland.
I love the people of Uganda, honestly. The people in Uganda are very, very friendly, which is one thing that I love. There you can go up to anyone and become their friend in just a matter of seconds. And that's one of the best things that I like about Ugandans. And just Africans in general. There are a lot of people from different countries there as well. They're easy to love. I also grew to love Ugandan food. When I first went or learned that I was going to Uganda, I looked up some of the pictures online, and I wasn't really sure what to expect, just because it looked like there was a lot of different kind of just mush on a plate. So I was a little bit worried about that. But when I got there, over time I was able to grow to love the food there. My first area was called Masaka, and there they would eat a lot of something called matoke. Matoke is it's a banana, but it's not exactly a banana. Most bananas turn yellow when they go ripe and you peel them and eat them. But these matoke that they eat, they stay green. In fact, when they go ripe, they just go straight to black. But what they do is they peel them with a knife and they put them all inside of banana leaves and then steam them. And then they mash it up, and then on top you can put all kinds of different sauce. You put chicken with broth or beef with broth, and then they've also got, they call it G-nut paste. It's pretty much peanut butter, but in a paste form, and then you put it on top of it. So it's kind of different. It's really unique, but it's an acquired taste, I could say. My favorite dish there was, it's called injera, and this originates from Ethiopia, though they do have different restaurants in Uganda with this dish as well. My very first time eating it, I hated it. It was, I think it was my first or second week in Uganda. I was in a group, there were, I think, 4 of us, missionaries, either 4 or 6, and they took me to one of these injera restaurants, and we sat down, and they brought out this plate of food, set it on the table, and everyone just rolled up their sleeves and started eating with their hands, like everyone on the same plate. And so it was a little bit gross at first. And it's super sour. It's fermented rice, the first one that I ate. And so it's a really different kind of a dish, but again, it's an acquired taste. It was about my 3rd time I really started to love it, and I want to have it again, to be honest. I've heard they have one in Salt Lake, but yeah.
In Uganda, they have 3 staples. They have rice, then something called posho, which is corn flour, corn ground up into a flour, and then you boil water and you slowly add it, kind of like a cream of wheat, but until it solidifies into something that looks like mashed potatoes but tastes nothing like it. It's just, a thick white blob of bland, tasteless stuff that it's very filling, and it's really cheap to make, so that's one of their staples. But they'll add sauces to it to make it flavorful. And then the 3rd main staple is matoke, which is giant green bananas that they boil and mash and make them kind of into like a paste. Not really a paste, it's thicker than that, so it's not like a spread for bread, but it's just mashed potatoes but made out of bananas, I guess you could say. That's the best way to describe it. That one, depending on who prepared it, was good or bad. So I probably ate rice and beans a quarter of my daily for a quarter of my mission, just because you could go and buy a plate of rice and beans for 75 cents to $1, depending on how much prices had inflated that day or that week or that year. So and then if you wanted a nicer meal, you'd get like some chips and beef or chips and chicken, French fries, so chips and beef, or rice and beef or rice and chicken, and that would be like $2 a plate. And could be really good or could be really bad depending on what kind of meat you got, stuff like that. For breakfast, I would usually make I'd buy eggs and just fry them into like an omelet and then cook them and put them on toast. Or you could buy a box of oatmeal for a couple bucks and use that. I'd buy bread and make toast. For dinner, we usually cooked at home. If we ate dinner, we didn't eat dinner until like 9 o'clock at night when we got back, so we didn't have dinner appointments almost ever. So we just eat lunch at 2 and then just wait until we got home at 9 o'clock, and then in between reporting and closing the day, we'd make a quick meal, usually beef or something nice. We'd go and buy it from the butcher, so you could go to the butcher and say, hey, I want that cut of meat, and then he'd just cut it right off the cow and then cut it into pieces for you and then throw it in a bag. And we weren't supposed to do that. I don't think our health advisor was very wary on the things that we ate, but we did it anyways. So they had something called chapatis and Rolex. Chapati is kind of like a tortilla. They mix flour and salt and some oil, and then they fry it in just on a burner or something like that, on like metal plate that's over coals. And then we would use that as a tortilla. So if we'd make beef stew or something, or if we'd make hamburger meat, we'd eat it with that, just kind of like a burrito or something. And then they had something called Rolex, where they'd fry eggs into an omelet, and then they'd put it on top of the chapati, and then they rolled up like a breakfast burrito, and they'd put eggs and cabbage, onions, tomatoes, green peppers, stuff like that. Those were good. Those were also not allowed because the people who prepared them were very unsanitary, but it was probably the most popular meal for missionaries. Just if you want a quick lunch or a quick dinner, you could get 2 of them, or two to 4 of them for $1, depending on what size and who was charging you and if they wanted to gouge you or not. Other interesting foods, I mean, just like grasshopper, there's cow intestines, stuff like that. I don't know what else. There's a lot more food than that in Uganda, but that's the gist of it. There's also something they ate a lot of fish, and they'll just dry it out in the sun, and then they'll feed it to you, or they'll smoke it or fry it. I don't like fish very much. It makes me sick to my stomach. So I didn't like the fish, and I tried to avoid it, but if they gave it to me, I'd usually eat it. Oh yeah, the fruit there is awesome. In Uganda, they have the best pineapple I've ever tasted. I don't like pineapple here anymore. I'm spoiled. I just actually last week I had the first pineapple that I've said I actually enjoyed this pineapple, and I shouldn't be like that because I know it's going to be hard to get back to Uganda, but it's just really high quality, really tasty pineapple there. Really good bananas. They have the little miniature bananas that are like this size. They're really good. And then some other bigger bananas. Have really, really good mango in Uganda as well. And when members would give mango, oh, it was the best.
Malawi, I guess the main thing they have there is like ground corn meal or maize meal. They have maize there, they call it maize there and stuff. And it's a popular thing all in Southern Africa. And everywhere you go, they'll call it something different. Where actually, when I was in the MTC, one of the guys had him do some of this, and I thought it was mashed potatoes on there. And I remember taking my fork and sticking it in to eat the mashed potatoes, and the whole thing came up, and my first thought is they have no idea how to make mashed potatoes here, but like it's just like they grind it up like into powder, into cornmeal, and then they'll mix it with water and things and make it where you actually eat it with your hands and stuff. You just kind of like shape it into it's always like with soup or some kind of what they refer to as soup or relish, and you just kind of make like a little cup out of it, like a tortilla scoops kind of chip, and scoop up some stuff and eat it like that, but that's the main thing they have there. A lot of chicken. You'll eat every part of the chicken and stuff. We did a lot of that. I remember chicken hearts and chicken liver and intestine and the whole 9 yards. We do all kinds of things there, and that's probably the most common meat that they do. A lot of goat. We had, I guess in Malawi especially, they had what they called mbewa, where it's like basically rats that they've caught, field mice as they call them and stuff. They look like rats though. They just kind of like shish kebab them and they boil them. And I guess some places they say they peel them off. Every time I always saw them, we go to the market and there'd just be piles of these dead rats, and they boil them just like that. Like they catch them and eat them, fur and everything, and it was the most disgusting thing ever. I never ate that, I'll be honest. I couldn't get that in my mouth, but but like did a lot of grasshoppers. Caterpillars was a major thing there. I can't remember the word they used for them. I guess fruit was one of my favorite things there. They had like fruit was all over the place. You know, they had tons of mango trees everywhere you went, and I guess something they called manna. I never actually figured out what it really is, but it looks kind of like a small apple, but it has like orange slice size seeds in it, and it's super sweet, and just any kind of fruit, like exotic fruit that you would think of here, you can pretty much get your hands on out there, and bananas all year round, you know. And yeah, I guess they have what they call one of their favorite times of year is the Ishwa season, and Ishwa is termites pretty much. They you know how they have the big they're like, you watch Tarzan, you know how like you see them like blowing out the giant termites and eating them there and stuff, and they have the same kind of big termites, you know, and they love them. You know, they fry them up most of the time, and when they fry them, they taste kind of like peanut butter for a while until you let it sit in your mouth, you know. And but the kids like eating them straight out of the mounds, you know, and stuff, and they kind of taste like blood when they're just alive, you know. But yeah, they like every season, there's a season every year where they just like start flying like crazy, and people are eating them all the time, you know, and it's like their main course there during that time. There is they do a lot of I guess another season they have like these giant green grasshoppers that will come in once a year too. That becomes a favorite meal for them as well. Those aren't so great either, you know, but they're not bad, you know. And so I guess Malawi is very much fish based as well. They have a lake right there. Lake Malawi is half the country, you know, and so you'd eat all kinds of things, and they have what they call kapenta, which is pretty much like, I don't know, little tiny fish that they would just dry out, and you just eat them like that. You eat everything, like the smaller fish they catch, you just eat them whole head, everything, you know. They just kind of boil them and cook them up in their tomato soup kind of thing, you know, and you just eat them with the enzima and go for it, you know. But they also have like chambo and stuff in Malawi, which I think is like a tilapia, like a freshwater tilapia kind of thing, you know. And that was really good. You get the bigger fish a lot better than eating all the little ones, you know. I guess as far as Zambia goes, the food's relatively similar. They call it nshima, I think, there, which if you do it backwards, they will give you a hard time about it. If you call it nsima in Zambia or nshima in Malawi. But again, a lot of like soup-based things there. They, I guess, just kind of, the fish isn't so big in Zambia. There's not like a water source like that there, and when you do eat fish there, I got sick the one time I had fish there, so I'd kind of avoid that if you can, you know. Goat was probably the one thing I ate a ton there. Goat and mangoes.
So the food in Africa is very different from here. The first African meal that I had, it was nsima with kapenta. And so depending on where you are in either Zambia or Malawi, it's either nsima or nshima. And so that was kind of interesting. The languages are very similar between the countries. So nsima is just maize meal. It's like our cornmeal, and they just kind of make it into this pliable mush. I don't know. They you mold it with your hands, and you eat it with your hands. And so you just take a little bit, and then they always have side dishes. They usually have like a vegetable for sure, and then either meat or beans as well, just depending on the meal, the time of day, or what they were able to afford for that meal. And so the nsima was I thought it was really good, actually. There's not a whole lot of taste to it. Some people either love it or hate it. I loved it, and I thought it was really good, and it fills you up very fast. And so I had to work up my appetite for it, you know, like my stomach at first could only handle just a little bit of it, but eventually by the end of my mission I could eat like a man. But anyway, the way they prepare their food, like they usually use a lot of cooking oil, and they kind of steam fry their vegetables. Pretty much, we used to like to say that pretty much anything green the Malawians eat, which isn't completely true, but they eat a lot of green things. One of my favorite foods was pumpkin leaves, like our orange pumpkins. Just the leaves of that plant is actually edible, and it's quite tasty. So there's lots of different ways to prepare it. You know, you can slice up tomatoes and onions and use that in the, and you kind of just put just a little bit of onion, cooking oil and a little bit of water, and then you put all of your ingredients in, and it just kind of steams it and just makes it really, it's kind of like a soupy vegetable, and it was so good, so good. It's a good thing I went on a mission, because before my mission I didn't like vegetables, especially squash, but they eat a lot of squash, and so that was pretty fun to taste all the different kinds of things, and they tend to keep their flavors very natural. If they use flavoring, it's salt and maybe some packaged soup. That was always interesting to me when we would go to the grocery store and my companions would buy these packages of soup, and that's what they use as seasoning. It like thickens your broth up and it gives you flavor, so that was pretty neat to see. Chicken was expensive there. It was kind of a luxury for them to eat meat, so I thought that was cool. And they like to eat every part of an animal, and I had fun trying out different things. They also eat caterpillars, like popcorn, so that was pretty fun to try the caterpillars. They were called mopani worms, and they would just sell them in the market, and then you'd take them home and you'd bake them, and they did not smell very nice, but they tasted fine. And they eat ants. In Malawi, they eat field mice. I never tried that though. I don't know how that tastes, but they definitely know how to use their resources, and they use them well. Oh, so my first meal, I forgot, was kapenta. It was ensima with kapenta. And kapenta are these little itty bitty tiny fish that are found in Lake Malawi. And they just take them out and they dry them, and they're very salty. And you just kind of cook them and warm them up, and you eat the entire thing, the head, the tail, everything. So that was kind of fun.
The classic Zimbabwean dish, I would assume most people would agree, is sadza and chicken relish and vegetables. So sadza is basically the staple diet, because they grow lots of corn there. They call it maize, not that big of a stretch. But then they have grinding mills where you take your dried maize, grind it into flour, and so then you have lots of what's called milli meal. And you take that, you boil it, you stir it up, and it becomes basically a big paste. And some people like it really hard, some people like it really soft. But regardless, when you eat it, you are putting your fingers into burning hot lava, and so you got to be careful when you're first starting. Every green missionary burns his fingers, I think, at least a little bit, because they do not know. So basically, you take that, and it's basically I'm saying basically a lot. They're taking something the consistency of Play-Doh, and you take it and you can make it into either a ball or into a little scoop. And then you scoop up some gravy, which has pieces of meat or vegetables, and you take that and you eat that, and it's absolutely delicious. The first time you have it, it's the strangest experience, but eventually you grow to love it. And then they have some sort of meat, and almost always chicken, and they know how to fry chicken there. It's not Kentucky chicken, it's not Southern fried chicken, but it isn't really tasty. the way that they do it. And then there's a thing called kovu, which is a vegetable that grows in a stalk out of the ground. You'll see it being grown in every single person's garden. And as the leaves come off, they just pluck the leaves, and then it continues to grow up and up. So it starts off, on the ground, and eventually it'll be this tall, and it'll just have a bare stalk with like 5 or 6 leaves at the top that they'll pick. And they chop it and fry that. So you use the sadza to basically dip it and pick up vegetables or relish in the meat and eat that. And when I say relish, I don't mean what they put on hot dogs here. I mean relish is basically any meat or gravy that they have with the food. So that's your basic meal. Sometimes people will like kapenta, and kapenta is these little tiny dried fish that I never really enjoyed. I ate it, and I always was very grateful when someone offered it to me. And I don't know, but I guess you compare that to the chicken, and I definitely had my preference. I think the hardest part about kapenta was knowing that they had eyes that are looking at me, but it was great. And let's see, what else was a big favorite. I was offered rabbit many times, and guinea pig once or twice. The most extreme ones, I'm sure that all the missionaries we love talking about, and the members, they would love feeding it to us, because they're saying, oh no, you have to have this. You're eating in Zimbabwe, you have to have a traditional Zimbabwean meal. So one was maklimbi, or madora, which is the caterpillars. And so these caterpillars grow by the thousands on some of these trees. And they call them mupani worms as well. And they'll fry those up, and you'll eat those just like you would with the chicken. And I remember the first time I had those, I pick one up out of the bowl, and I'm looking at it, and I'm just going, you are ugly. And I'm going to eat you. But so you pop it in, and once you try and forget what it is that's in your mouth, it's delicious. It's just the face is what got me. And there's something called ishwa, which is these flying termites that during a certain time of the year, kids will stand around these little termite holes, and they'll cover them, because termites will come out at night. And so if you cover it, they think it's nighttime because the daylight's no longer shining down. And so then they'll start crawling out by the hundreds, and the flying ones are the ones you want to eat. The ones that are on the ground have angry little pincers that they hurt. And I didn't know that. And I was trying to pick them up, and the kids were like, no, Marungu, no. And, I got pricked pretty good. Those things do not let go. And so they'll grab the termites out of the air. Sometimes they'll pull off the wings, and they'll stick them in a bag, and they'll fry those up and eat those. Or you can just eat it right out of the air if you want, which I did because the kids are like, do it. So I was like, okay. So that was good. Zimbabweans like to eat parts of the chicken that we're not used to, like chicken feet and chicken neck. And while it does take some getting used to, it is very edible and it's very tasty. Once you've gotten over your preconceived notions of saying feet, but they're pretty good. So yeah, the food is pretty tasty. Rice is another big one. Rice and beans, basically anything that comes big bulk bags and can be. They come up with really creative ways to eat it as well. You'll get, like, as missionaries, I guess when you go home, unless if you don't trust yourself cooking sadza, which is understandable, because if you cook it wrong, you're just gonna make yourself sick, just because if you don't boil it the right way and if you don't get all the lumps out, it's just not good. So you'll go home, and most missionaries cook rice or packets of macaroni or spaghetti. And there's lots of soup packets that you can put the flavoring on there and fry some meat. And I mean, that's your basic Zimbabwean meal. The biscuits there, the cookies they call biscuits, are you can buy really nice ones, and then you can buy the really bulk bags that are basically like, just flavor on flour. And I actually bought those all the time because it was something I would just sit there and study with. But it's the food that, man, now I'm really hungry. I miss that food really badly. So one of the drinks there is called mazoe, and it's fantastic because
it's basically just syrup that you're supposed to dilute, which I did not know. And so my companion's like, hey, pour yourself a glass of Mazoe and pour me some as well. I went, sure. And I went to the kitchen, and I'm brand new. Pour us both a glass and go back in, and he grabs it and he looks at it and he knows what I just did. And he just looks at me and he watches me as I take it, and I take a sip, and 5 times the amount of concentration that I should be getting of sugar, and my brain just exploded, and I spit it out. I'm like, whew. You know, I swear I could smell colors at that point. And, and he laughs and he's like, you're supposed to dilute it. Yeah, now you tell me. But occasionally you'll start craving that stuff once again. So it's good. I miss the Zimbabwean food a lot. Where like getting food is pretty cool because lots of people are entrepreneurs, and so they'll have little stands outside their houses or, you know, on the street somewhere. So if you ever need fresh tomatoes or fresh vegetables, they're right there. Like you just, a lot of the time we'll just poke our head out the window to a little kid that knows us, and we're like, hey, and we'll give them $1, like, go get us some tomatoes, and they'll run and they'll grab you some tomatoes and they'll bring them back, because kids are used to their moms having them do that all the time. So it's really fun. You feel really important. Like, hey kid, little one, and they're like, yes, and they run and they get you something, and then if you're nice, you'll give them a sweet or something like that.
The only thing I can think of that was really strange that I ate was sometimes they cook with chicken feet. That's it's not super common, but it's not uncommon either. And I had that once. So it was kind of like I guess almost a chili that they put on top of the rice, and there's just chicken feet in there. And it wasn't. I'm not gonna say it was like the best food I've ever had, but it wasn't bad either. Like the flavor was fine. It's just a little bit chewy. There's not a whole lot of meat on chicken legs though, or the chicken feet. So it just gives it flavor, I guess. Something else, we just cooked it as missionaries. No one else cooked it, but we bought on the street hammerhead shark. Cooked that up and ate it. That one was really good. Stingray. That one wasn't very good. That was kind of gross, but the food in Mozambique is pretty simple. There's not a whole lot of, you know, really extravagant stuff, eating weird parts of the animal and stuff like that. Not a whole lot of that. It's pretty simple. It's kind of hard to describe the food because it's just completely different from anything that we eat. Of course, as missionaries, we're allowed to go to the grocery store, which most Mozambicans don't, but we do. And so the missionaries generally eat a little bit different than most people do on a day-to-day basis. But of course, as a missionary, you have plenty of chances to try the food they eat as well. So almost all of Mozambican meals, I'd say probably 95% of Mozambican meals, consist of rice or something called shima. So shima is just it's like ground up corn flour, and they boil it with water until it gets really hard, really firm, and you can grab it with your hands. And but they don't eat that alone. They always have something with it. So that can be fried fish. Sometimes they fry up small fish like that big, or they have lots of like greens. So they have something called matapa, which is mandioca, or manioc, I guess in English, manioc leaves. And they mash that up and they cook it with coconut milk. A lot of the dishes have coconut milk in it. Also pumpkin leaves, they did the same thing with that. Something else called kovi, which I'm not sure what it is in English. I've heard it's collard greens that's cut up and then mashed. And they prepare all that. So generally speaking, that's called a caril. And they put that on top of the rice, or shima. The way they typically prepare it is they have something called a pilão, which is just it's like a hollowed out tree trunk kind of. So just like I guess like a big mortar and pestle. And so they put the food in there and then they mash it up with a great big stick. And then they cook it, they boil it for a long time. And it's good. Like, I don't know how to describe it. It's got coconut milk in it, so it's got a pretty mild flavor. It's really tasty. If you go to a restaurant, they'll almost always have chicken. So they have like fried chicken and usually rice, maybe potatoes on the side with a salad. It's pretty simple, but it's really good. The food's great. They also have a lot of food that you can buy on the street, kind of like snacks and stuff. All over they have that. Now we ate that quite a bit when I was there. I'm not sure. Maybe they're discouraging now. I think towards the end they're kind of discouraging us buying it for sanitary reasons. So I'm not sure what the rules are right now. But they have one of the common foods is something called shamusa. So it's just a little triangle that has like just this really thin fried bread or fried crust, I guess, with potatoes on the inside, or sometimes they have fish on the inside. Then they have bolinhos, which are just like little fried, like kind of like donut holes, except for not as sweet. And I mean lots. Like I could go on. There's lots of stuff you can buy on the street, but mostly just like little snacks and stuff.
I'm not being biased, but for my experience, from people that I know that serve the mission that live here, actually, I should have bring some here today. It's called the best food that everybody love, no matter where you come from. After you eat this food, you're gonna love it. It's called acheke. So acheke is made out of cassava roots. If you go to Smith or Rancho Markets or any Mexican store, you're gonna see a brown, long thing like this, brown. That's the cassava. So they ground that cassava and extracted water on it, and then make a lot of grain. Like then it looked like couscous. So that and the fish, fried fish. Oh my gosh! And tomato. It's the best. It's the best. All mission that I have known any mission that went there that I dislike that. It's their favorite. If I send an email today to all missionaries in Utah, say I have a chicken, come get it. They will come from my dad. Come with it. That's how good that thing is. So it's and then we have a sauce arachide, peanut butter sauce. It's made out of peanut butter. So you have all vegetables that you mix it up and fry them a little bit, and then adds whether you like fish or meat, you add on it and cook it. Add peanut butter on it. Once it's done, you eat it with the rice, or you eat it with what we call futu. It's made out of plantain banana. No, the banana we have here. It's a plantain banana. They mash it, and then you eat that sauce with it. There's also aloko. Aloko is made out of plantain banana. So the plantain banana, when it becomes yellow brownish type, then you fry it. You cut it, fry it, put a little bit of salt on it. You fry it. Delicious. If you want to see how much is great, cut a little bit of vegetables, onion, tomatoes, and all that garlic. Put it in a pan. Fry them a little bit, put water and let it boil for probably 30 minutes. Add that to aloko and hard boiled eggs. Oof. Man, I'm getting hungry now. It's the best. That's the best food ever. And there's a lot of them. And I know that one of the food that Michelle don't like, and this is funny. One day, I remember the Epis. Who was that? One of the elders that came, when they come early, they bite that food to give it to them. Say, oh, that's what you're gonna eat here. And that food too, it's made of cassava too. It's amidon, the tapioca. Technically, the tapioca, the soft tapioca, they make it like paste. They mix it and thing, and then it have no taste. It tastes like a little bit tart. But to like it, you need to have with a good sauce. So Michelin don't know that when you take it, you have to put it in a sauce so they can swallow it. You don't chew it. You have to swallow it. So what they do first, they put the hand in and pick it up and start eating it. Oh, it tastes like a Vaseline. So that's the only food that mission don't. I don't myself. I don't very like it. I only eat it when my mom cooking my aunts because they cook the sauce very well. So beside them, I don't eat it somewhere else because the way they prepare it, and if the person is not very super clean, it's hard for you to eat it. So that's the only food that I know that it's a big no-no for some foreign missionaries. But my companion Miller, he love it. He's from Canada. He love it. He eats snails and look his face. Eats snails and cow skin, all that. They don't kill nobody, and people eat it. They're fine. So those are the weird part of the mission. But the good thing about it, even if you go to somebody else, absolutely they're gonna offer you food. Even the most poor person, he wants to share his food with you. To have that person's heart. Just, even if you put your thought and say, oh, I already eat, man, I'm going to taste this food to see how good it is. Put your hand there, wash your hand, put your hand there, take the, say, oh, it's delicious, but I already ate. Man, if I know I wouldn't eat, I would have come eat this. They will feel so grateful that they serve you. Then you establish the spirit. You allow the spirit to touch that person also as well. So any mission that will go to those countries, don't get scared. It won't kill you. If they're eating and they survive, yes, on first time it may give you a stomach ache, but you will get used to it.
So basically, most of what Angolans eat is pretty normal, despite what a lot of people might think. Mostly rice and beans. All the time, rice and beans. But one of the main Angolan food though, it's called funge, which is basically boiled water and flour. So, and it's kind of like has a gooey texture, and it's kind of flavorless. And so at the beginning of the mission, it's kind of weird. I know the first time I had it was actually my first Sunday in Angola, and I remember thinking, I didn't think it was bad, but I just didn't have any flavor, so I was like, yeah, whatever. But near the end of my mission, I just loved funge. Funge is the best food on the planet. But when Angolans eat funge, they always have some type of sauce with it, which the better the sauce, the better the funge is. Also, Angolans love something called kizaka, which in my mind is basically spinach, but it's a little different. And they usually eat that with their funge. It's kizaka and funge. But besides that, it's pretty normal rice and beans. One thing that was interesting to me is that a lot of Angolans eat French fries on a regular basis. They just fire them up and serve them with rice and beans, which I was not expecting that, but it was good. Also, when Angolans make noodles or pasta, usually they don't make a red sauce with it, which is what we Americans do. Usually it's, I don't even know how to describe it, but some like oil-based sauce, usually with chicken or pork or something. So it's a little different, but it still tastes good. There are a lot of people who sell food on the street because there's tons of outdoor markets in Angola. I think technically mission president's wife advises not to buy stuff off the street and stuff. But one of the best foods in Angola is called frangite, which is basically just fried, or it's grilled chicken, and it's so good. You just buy it on the street for like $4 for half a chicken. One of the best snacks you can get. Me and my last companion, we made it a goal to get it every week. So good. But yeah, getting food, not too hard. There are a lot of stores, supermarkets that you can go to. That's almost American style. Well, basically American style. And get your rice, you get beans, sauces, pasta, pretty much everything you need.
food in Madagascar, like I mentioned, is really good. It's really cheap compared to American standards, so missionaries have no problem buying food as long as they're wise with their money, which tends to be a problem sometimes. It's very... it took a little bit to get used to, I guess. It might be hard on your body at first because you're not used to it. But like I said, they eat a lot of rice. Their meat is really good. Any meat, whether it's pork, beef, chicken, they do a really good job of cooking it, and so it's really soft, and it's easy to eat. They also like a lot of fat in their meat, which obviously I didn't like, and most people don't like. Coming from an American culture, we tend to shy away from fat, but they'll eat it, and they really like it for some reason. It's interesting. But if you tell them that you don't like it, it's fine. They won't necessarily be offended, and they'll give you the meat. One time I was eating, and I was with a member, and I eat my food and left the fat there, and I looked away for something. I looked back and my fat was gone. I was like, oh, all right, I guess he wanted it more than me, and it was totally fine. So they like that kind of thing. They really like spicy food, and the food isn't necessarily spicy just by itself, but they have this thing called sakai. So every table, if you go to a restaurant, well, they don't call them restaurants, they call them hotelis. Basically a little hole-in-the-wall shack thing where they serve rice and look. And they'll have a little container on the table with the peppers. That's all it is peppers. It's called sakai. And you just put a little bit of that on your rice, and it basically just makes everything spicy. They really like that. I really liked it. It was good. They also drink this thing called, what's it called? Ranu pangu, which is burnt rice water. And it sounds kind of disgusting, but it's actually really good. So after they finish cooking the rice, and there's always rice stuck to the pan, the bottom of the pan, and they'll put water in it, and they'll cook it, and the burnt rice, and they'll cook water with it, and so it comes out brown, kind of. I guess imagine it looks like something like coffee, but and you can drink that, and it's kind of an acquired taste. It takes a while, and a lot of missionaries didn't like it, but I liked it. I thought it was good. So they'll supply you with that, because when you eat rice, you get thirsty a lot. They also, with the rice, they'll put, I don't know what you would call it. It's called lasari in Malagasy, and there's a couple different kinds. They'll have mangoes, tomatoes, or carrots, or maybe other things, or what's that called? Papaya. And they'll grate it, and then they'll mix it with like vinegar and onions and stuff. And so it's kind of like a garnish that you'll put on with the meat and everything on your rice, which is really good. Desserts in Madagascar, from an American standpoint, are not very good at all. They don't use a lot of sugar, so their cakes look the same as ours, but they taste like butter. That's kind of my equivalent of it. They taste like butter. They're not very good. For the most part, there are some bakeries that I would go to with some of my companions that were really, really good, and we get some stuff. But I think those are mostly French influenced, because there's a lot of French influence there, from the fact that they were a colony of France for about 60 years, about 65 years. But there are a lot of other little types of foods. They have these things called nems, sorry, and they're kind of like an egg roll, but it has like meat rolled up in it. They have sambos, which are kind of like what are those called? Wontons, like Chinese wontons. They also have meat stuffed inside of them. A bunch of other fried stuff that they come up with, like deep fried potatoes, like deep fried mashed potatoes, or they'll have spicy breads, other random little snacks. They also have lots of crackers. That's I don't know. That's what they'll feed you when you go over to their house. They'll have little crackers and then some soda. Soda is really big there. But that's what they can give you, or that's what they'll give you. I mean, obviously the water's not safe to drink. So they'll give you a lot of soda. I think probably one of my favorite things, so the food though, was it's called mufokunju, and it's basically banana bread, but not what we think of. It's a deep fried banana. Like you take a whole banana and you peel it, and then you dip it in batter, and then they deep fry it. And they're really, really good. They're really hot when they're done, because as you imagine, a fried banana gets really hot. Those are really, really good. All sorts of different concoctions, and from one place to the next, it might be different. You know, one member might really like this food, and so they'll make it for you, and you may not like it. But generally, the food is the same in most places. Price-wise, there's some areas where it's cheaper, and it'd be easier to buy food. There are also American-type restaurants that a lot of the missionaries like to go to because they missed American food. And there's a few that come close. So, you know, maybe what you'd expect here, but the majority won't. You know, it's traditional Malagasy food, which is fine with me because I really liked it. I mean, you don't gain any weight because it's just rice, and after an hour you're hungry again because it's just rice. But yeah, the food is really good, and I miss it a lot.
I kind of divide Malagasy food into two things in my mind. There's the everyday food, which is rice, and you'll have a big bowl of rice, and then there's a loke, and the loke is the word for like toppings, what you put on that rice. And there's a bunch of different types of loke. There's beans is super common. There's fwanzuburi, which is these really big peanut tasting beans, and they're super delicious. That's my favorite loke. Then there's ravitutu, which is crushed leaves, boiled. Some missionaries like it. It's not a huge favorite. Then there's anana, which is stuff. Translates to stuff, which is just green stuff. That's actually one of my favorites. And then often they'll eat it with beef, maybe a little bit of chunks of meat, and not just meat. They'll have a lot of fat mixed in too, which some missionaries actually really loved it, and some missionaries really didn't. They just want the flesh. What is that called? The meat. The meat. So that's like the everyday food. That's what everybody eats pretty much every meal. Just rice with some kind of loke on top. Then there's the fun food, which is the street food. Madagascar has awesome street food. They have nems, sambos. Nems are kind of like egg rolls, a little bit similar to egg rolls. They're just deep fried rolls with whatever kind of vegetable or jed inside. Then there's sambos, which I think came from India because I've seen them in like India restaurants and stuff. But it's just kind of the same thing, but it's a triangle. Then there's mesquite, which is like a kebab, just like little pieces of meat. And they grill it right there in front of you. You tell them you want however many you want, 10, 20. And they're like 2.5, 5 cents a piece. So you'll go buy 10 and spend 50 cents and just eat a bunch of meat. There's mufakunju, which is bread, battered banana. It's like bananas dipped in like a cake batter, kind of, or like a bread batter, and then deep fried. So it's like this gooey, mushy banana. Super delicious. That's, I don't know, there's a bunch of other stuff. You gotta be careful. Only eat it when it's hot. And don't eat too much, or your stomach is not gonna forgive you. But yeah, just as a snack, it's awesome. So I kind of like to try anything that is given to me that's edible. I'll at least try it. There's one thing that's called fromage de tête. It's cheese of the head, and they'll take like a cow head or something and boil it. Just a cow head, and they'll boil it, and all the oils and fats and hairs float to the top. And then they take it and cool it. So it's cold, and then they'll chop it up into little cubes, and you eat it. I don't like it plain, but it wasn't bad on a sandwich. So on a piece of bread with some lasari, which is carrots and vinegar. So they do like to eat chicken feet, which is pretty good. I mean, the texture, you got to get used to the texture, but the flavor is really nice. And then I had they often boil chicken heads and eat those, and they'll just cut the head off, feathers and all. Don't waste time plucking anything. Boil it, and then they'll set it out on a plate. And not a big fan of the chicken head, but I did try it. Wasn't able to eat it in one whole bite, so I had to chomp through the skull and eat half of it at a time. But it wasn't bad. I tried it once, and now I don't have to ever try it again. So I'm sure there's, I mean, they eat every part of the animal. So you always eat, you know, in the United States we're picky, you know, we only eat the muscle, the flesh, the meat. But no, in this place we eat everything, every part.
So they have lots of different types of food, of course. I mean, it's an entire island. I mean, in preparation for that, there's over 20 million people on this island. And so food has become a pretty major part of, you know, culture anywhere. And rice is their staple. They start with rice. A lot of the rice they eat has actually been farmed there, and some of it's also imported. So they eat rice. And rice is, it's not as like we would eat it here. They eat rice over there in giant portions. I mean, that's the base of all dishes. So you'd get like a plate of rice about that big, and then you'd get a little serving of meat about that big. Meat and beans, or you know, chicken and beans, some form of that along those lines. And then they would also serve that plate of rice, the meat, with another bowl of like a broth. And that would be used to, you know, wet the rice down, make that more palatable. And then maybe another different kind of fruit, like a tomato salad, like something that's been added with vinegar and onion and something like that too. Also add a little extra flavor. And that was usually what we ate. And that was a very delicious meal. Otherwise, that was a pretty extravagant almost for them. So a pretty common meal would just be the rice and your meat. On the other flip side, they had street food. Street food was mostly deep fried. They would deep fry like bell peppers. They deep fry potato, they call them cutlets. They were just these little potato, almost dumplings. Potato mash, they'd put ground beef, green onion, make these little potato patties, batter them, and then fry them, and those, you'll love them. Those are so good. They'd fry bananas. They had other kinds of street food, which was like a cold food. They'd make potato salad. They'd make pasta salad. Those you'll see a lot at little side places. With those kinds of food, you have to eat those either really early in the morning or wait till the next day, because their mayonnaise is egg-based and they don't have refrigerators. And so there are, you know, a threat of not so happy things in those foods. They drink a lot of fruit juice, fruits. I was completely organic in one of my areas. I lived like literally 2 minutes away from the market, and we ate completely all natural foods that were farmed within, you know, 20 minutes from where I lived. And it was very good food. You just had to watch cleaning, make sure you're cleaning well, and just cooking things fully.
The food I ate the most in South Africa was pap and chicken. So pap is just maize meal, cornmeal, cooked and boiled, and it's kind of like, it looks like mashed potatoes, but it's harder. And so it fills your stomach up, but it's not necessarily very nutritious. So they eat a lot of pap, and then they eat chicken with it, and maybe some sauce and beans or whatnot. So that's what I ate probably almost every day of my mission. I had pap and chicken. You'll get some unique stuff as well, especially in the African areas. When I say African, that's the black areas. So in the black areas, black culture, you might get a little, I loved cowhead. Loved it. There's one area where I'd buy cowhead on the street. I don't know if I was supposed to, but I loved cowhead.
the meat was so good, especially on like the back of the head. Probably the most unique thing I ate was cow intestine. They call it muhodu, and it's kind of a delicacy in their culture. And so it's probably the most unique thing and thing I was not used to, I guess. But they love it, and it can be good. And then you'll eat, like, I had chicken neck and just a variety of food. One thing I noticed as far as food goes is that you eat everything. So for example, with chicken, you don't just eat the meat off of the bone, but you get down to, you know, eating kind of the tendons and what connects the chicken to the bone. And in their culture, they even get down, the kids will like chew on the bone and suck the marrow out of the bone, so they get everything they can out of it. So when I came home from my mission, I could not believe, like, when my family ate chicken and they left so much meat and stuff on the bone. It kind of frustrated me. But now I'm back to used to American culture. Another food that was common there is vorse, boerewors, more common in the white areas, but people in the black areas eat it as well. It's kind of like a sausage. Comes from German culture, I believe, European culture. As far as dessert goes, they don't eat a lot of sweet things, so everything's kind of plain. But I'm trying to think of the name of this pudding that was common, especially in the white areas. And they had milk tart was a dessert.
A common dish there among Afrikaans individuals, as well as those with a darker complexion in the townships, they love to eat pap, which is, anybody that's eaten in the South would recognize grits, you know, and pap is kind of like grits, but instead of using yellow corn to make it, it's used with white corn, and it's kind of tasteless, almost looks like mashed potatoes. And sometimes they serve it with a gravy, sometimes it's just kind of the pap and some sausage. And that's a really common dish. Some of the foods that were interesting, I've eaten chicken feet. I ate mahodu, which is cow intestines. On one instance, I ate goat head, which was interesting. It was literally, you know, a head there. It was cooked, luckily, and it was cut right down the center. And so you would basically take the part of the head that you wanted and, you know, dish up. So they'd peel off the skin and eat it. So I had brains and eye and tongue and cheek. It was good. Good experience. Other interesting foods. That's probably the most of it. The mahodu, one thing I could say about it, smelled terrible when it was cooking. There were many times we'd walk into a house and we'd walk through the kitchen and the smell was so bad it would just about gag you. Like I almost threw up several times, and the room would just be full of flies. But the people loved it. It was great. You know, it wasn't so bad after it was cooked. You know, so it was good. If you're in town, KFC is super huge. So is McDonald's over there. So KFC is the cheapest place to eat in town. Trying to think. Something interesting about KFC. I don't believe that they had mashed potatoes, that they served mashed potatoes. Instead, they'd serve mini loaves with, like, your combo meals. So that was kind of interesting.
Food in Africa is rice. Rice is life, and I think that in a lot of countries in the world it probably is, but in it's no different in West Africa. Rice is life. Rice is cheap. It has the nutrients that they need, and they have, of course, their own local ways of preparing it. And in Sierra Leone and Liberia, they have, you know, slightly differing recipes, but particularly in Sierra Leone, well, okay, no, in Liberia as well, they put on top of the rice, they prepare rice, they boil up the rice, prepare it, and then they put what is called plaças on top of it. Now, plaças, the best way that it was described to me by an American companion is plant sauce. plus sauce is like plant sauce, and pretty much it means any type of plant that they have. What they'll do is they'll get a plant, some usually leaves of some sort, and they'll grip them in their hand, and then they'll use a knife and they'll kind of cut off the very top, and then they'll inch it up a little bit, cut off the very top again, and inch it up a little bit. So they just have this bunch of leaves, and it ends up looking kind of like if you were to take lettuce and throw it in a blender. It would just chop it up into a million little pieces. That's kind of what it ends up looking like. And they put that in a pot. They put tons of oil into it, a few different spices. There's a spice there that is really common called Maggi. It's like a kind of a bouillon kind of a spice, and they throw a bunch of that in and a whole bunch of oil, boil it up, and so it ends up becoming this sauce kind of a thing. This kind of the consistency of it would be, it's a very unique consistency, and it just goes right on top of the rice. The oil drips all down into the rice. The common oil there is palm oil, because there's a lot of palm trees there, and so they use lots and lots and lots of palm oil, and they put palm oil in this plus sauce, put it on the rice, and then you just eat it just like that. And there are different plants that they'll use. They'll use a common one in Sierra Leone is cassava leaf. So if you don't know what cassava is, you can look it up on the internet. But it's a plant that's grown in tropical climates, and the plant basically is like I think it's like a tuber, kind of like a potato. But it's long and thin, grows underground. But what they'll do in Sierra Leone is they'll cut the leaves off of it when it's just a really young plant. When it has just sprouted, they'll start harvesting the leaves off of it, and they'll use them. They'll cut them up, like I said, and put them in this plus sauce, which they'll put on their rice. They also use some sweet potato leaves. They have local species of sweet potatoes that they'll do the same thing when the plant is young. They'll cut off the leaves and they'll put it in they'll make it into a plus sauce and put it on their rice. But some other common foods, and again, it's just more things that they put on their rice. Rice is the thing that they eat, but some other common things that they put on it is seafood. Because both Sierra Leone and Liberia are right next to the ocean, and so fishermen will go out into the ocean and they'll catch fish, and so the fish is a pretty cheap meat, and so they'll get fish and they'll cook the fish. They'll either fry the fish, or I think sometimes they might boil it, but a lot of the time is fried, and they'll just throw the entire fish in there though. They won't like, oh, I'm going to fillet this fish and pull all the bones out. No, they just throw the whole fish in there, and you get to deal with the bones, which was probably my least favorite part about the food, is just having to deal with these fish bones that were in my food. Other common foods is, they have other things too. There's some crab that they'll sometimes throw in it, little tiny crabs, or really small shellfish that are there. In Liberia, there's a dish called palm butter. It's a palm butter, but and it's taken from palm nuts. They'll take palm nuts and they'll beat them in a giant mortar and pestle. That's one of the most common things that they use for cooking. Like a mortar and pestle that you'd think of that you can grind spices with, just times that by like 20. And it's this big, huge wooden thing with a big rod that they'll put whatever it is they want to smush and what they want to mash up in it, and then they'll beat it and turn it into a mush or a powder or something like that. But they'll process a lot of their foods with that, and they'll do sometimes leaves, instead of cutting them, sometimes they'll beat them. But anyway, in Liberia, they'll do that with the palm nuts, and they end up getting like a oily, buttery kind of thing, and they'll put that on top of their rice, and it's actually pretty good. My favorite African dish, though, is fufu. Now, if I were to describe fufu to you, it's kind of like a dough. It's like a dough that is put in a bowl, and then a soup is poured over it. One of the few dishes that actually doesn't have rice in it is fufu. And it's different depending on the country that it's made in. In Sierra Leone, they'll make it using just cassava. Just solely cassava, and they'll boil up the cassava so that it's nice. Cassava is like this tuber kind of a plant that grows underground. So they'll boil it up kind of like you would boil potatoes, and then make it soft, and they'll just smash it up in their mortar and pestle, and knead it, and it ends up becoming kind of like a dough. And then, like I said, they'll put soup on it, and the way you eat it is you just grab a ball of the dough and kind of dip it in the soup, or you get some, you know, if they have some fish in there, get some fish meat on it and stick it in your mouth and swallow it down. It's the hardest thing to get over not chewing, because you don't chew. It would be pointless to chew. You just swallow it down. That's the way you eat it. In Ghana, they make it differently. And I had a lot of Ghanaian companions. That's how I got introduced to Ghanaian fufu. But in Ghana, they'll make it with cassava and plantain. They'll do the same exact thing. They'll boil up plantains and boil up cassavas and mix the two. And it ends up making the dough a little bit firmer. And that's actually my favorite, is the Ghanaian fufu. I could eat that all day. And there's a soup that they like to put with it called groundnut soup. And groundnut is ground nut, and groundnuts is what they call peanuts. I guess probably because they grow on the ground, but they call peanuts groundnuts. And so they'll make a sauce using a lot of peanuts, and so it's a kind of a peanutty soup that they'll use it. They'll sometimes eat it with rice, but a lot of time it's eaten with fufu, and that's my favorite dish. I could eat that like crazy. And like I said, at first, when you're getting used to the consistency of this food, it's different. It's different than anything I've ever had in America. But it's really good. After, I think most missionaries that eat it come to really like it. You know, the first time it's like this, wow, interesting, but it quickly grows on you, and you end up really enjoying it. I think as far as most missionaries anyway. Let me think, other foods. Oh, another part of the best part about food in Sierra Leone is the fruit. Boy, they've got fruit that we don't even have here, and they have so much of it, and it's so good. Mangoes are the first thing that come to mind. They have fresh mangoes. During mango season, you know, just a month or so, or a couple months out of the year is when the mangoes start to ripen. And in Sierra Leone and Liberia, mango trees are like, in America we have maple and oak. They just have mangoes. Like, everyone has a mango tree in their yard. Mango trees are all over the mountains. Mango trees are all over the sides of the road. And so mangoes, during mango season, the whole entire country just gets covered in mangoes. And you get them straight off of the tree, and they're fresh and they're ripe, and it's unlike it's hard to find mangoes in a supermarket here in the United States that taste that good, that are that fresh and that ripe. Missionaries like to indulge on mangoes a little bit during mango season, but it's fantastic. Another thing is coconut. Coconut is one thing that's available all year round. That's one thing that doesn't seem to really have a season. And what they'll do with coconut is they'll pull it straight off of the tree, usually when it's pretty young, and it doesn't actually have a hard shell on it, like you would think of coconut here in the store. It doesn't have a hard shell on it. It just has like a green husk, and inside the green husk is milk. And if the coconut is picked early enough, then the meat inside the coconut that normally you would think of as being hard is not. It's kind of like a jelly kind of thing, and I think it tastes way better than hard coconut personally. But they'll sell it on the street. They'll get wheelbarrows, and they'll fill the wheelbarrow full of coconut, and they'll walk around the street, and you can buy them for very, very cheap and enjoy fresh coconut milk as you're out walking around. They call it coconut water, but whatever. But that's delicious as well. They have bananas all year round, and they have pineapple all year round. They also grow a couple other things. I mean, they have cucumbers. They have some native fruits that you don't see as much around here. One called soursop, S-O-U-R-S-O-P. You can look it up. It's a pretty good fruit. One that they call monkey apples. I have yet to translate that into what the real name for it is. They have star fruit. In Sierra Leone, they call it five-finger apple because it's a fruit that's shaped kind of like a star. Like if you were to cut it in half, it would be a star on the inside, and it tastes very similar to an apple. That's really good. But as far as a lot of the other vegetables that we have that grow that we can get in the supermarket, not a ton. You know, you can find occasionally you can find carrots, maybe you can find potatoes. You can find sweet potatoes there very commonly. Sweet potatoes is way more common than just a normal, you know, like a russet potato that you would find in the store here. But the sweet potatoes there are really good. It's a different species of sweet potato that's kind of purplish on the inside. So good that, you know, a lot of people will fry them up and sell them on the side of the road. Kind of like, not quite like potato chips, but more just like French fries. Like kind of like French fries, but they just cut them up into chunks, fry them, sell them on the side of the street.
I love Liberian food. I love it. At first, I was very like, okay, like I didn't really know what to expect with it. But basically, Liberian food is rice with these different soups that they make. And when I say soup, they mean soup, but for us, it's more like a stew. These different stews, and they just put that on top of their rice and they eat it. Some of my favorites that they had where they had potato greens, fried potato greens, and it's literally sweet potato leaves that they grow there, and they just chop up these leaves and they just fry it in oil, and they put in some different spices inside, or fish, chicken, and then they have rice, and you just put the stew on top of the rice and you just eat it. Very spicy food. Very, very spicy. Like, when I came back home, you know, my family, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so spicy. This is so hot. You know, like if they're at Cafe Rio and it's like the mild, and, you know, I just eat it and it's like, so. They call their pepper pepe. And I have no idea what kind of pepper it is, but it is this small little bugger that is so extremely hot. Like, your mouth is on fire afterward, and you're just, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die. But you learn to just get used to it. They have fried potato greens. They have cassava leaf, it's kind of like a potato, but then they have like the leaves of it. It looks like marijuana, honestly, in my opinion. It looks like it, but it's not, I promise. Just the leaves are very similar. And then they have something that's called palm butter, which is my favorite. They take, and they're so smart how they can do this. And they've done this for hundreds of years. And it's just such rich, you know, culture of cooking. They take palm kernels from palm trees, and they're these little orange nuts. They boil them, and then they pound them with a pestle and mortar, and it's hard work, and they get the skin off of the nut, and then they soak the nut, the skin in water, and then they drain it, so it's like this red oil flavoring that comes out, and they cook it in a pot with these different spices again. Oh my gosh, so good. Oh, I miss it. I miss one right now. But that's kind of what Liberia was: rice and spicy stews, a lot of fish. And then in Ghana didn't have much of a variety of food, in my opinion. It wasn't as spicy as Liberian food at all. I'm sure you can look up at, you know, the Ghana missionaries with their kind of food, but very, you know, the same food, fufu, which is like this Play-Doh, mashed potato kind of thing. That's a mix of cassava, which is like a potato, and a plantain, which is a sweeter, bigger version of a banana. They boil that to get it soft, and then they pound it, and it literally looks like Play-Doh, kind of like gray Play-Doh. And they take it, and then they dip it in a soup, and they swallow it whole. And I couldn't swallow it. I have like gag reflex or something, but I just couldn't do it. But they have other hand foods. They like to eat with their hands a lot. They call their hand their African spoon, because it's SPOON. So it's their African spoon, or their fork, FORK, their African fork. And so that was kind of a culture thing that I was like, oh, okay, I get to eat with my hands. I'm okay with that. A lot of fond memories with eating and helping cook food there.